Welcome back to the Dementia Collective. Today, we got a special episode. This is our 1 year anniversary, the happy birthday episode. It's pretty wild thinking that we're here at 1 year. We'll talk about it later on, but I never thought we'd be here. But here we are, and we have an extra special episode today. So we have a special guest. You may recognize her, Anoushka Fernandes. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Andy. I'm really happy to be here.
So today was going to be a little different than usual. Usually I'm on, the interviewing side and asking folks like yourself questions. But today we thought what would be interesting for the audience. And we kind of, as talking about it, we thought, what about a reflection where we kind of look back at a year and how did we get here and where do we see ourselves going, and just kind of talk about the journey that's been the Dementia Collective. So I brought Anoushka Fernandes over to help with this episode, and she's going to be our guest host today. So I'm going to pass it over to Anoushka right now.
Thanks, Andy. And let me be the first person to officially congratulate you on 1 year of the Dementia Collective. It's certainly been a huge resource in my life, and I'm very grateful for all of the education and learnings I had from it. So thank you very much for putting this show together, and I'm super excited to be here as the guest host for today. So exciting to be able to put you on the hot seat. And I know that you usually start your episodes by asking people to share their origin story. I know that you've shared with us a little bit about the background behind BlueBell Village, but walk us through a little bit about how did this podcast come to be?
Yeah, you know what? I've kind of lived my life as whatever happens, happens. I never wanted to end up in health. I never initially wanted to have a dementia support company. I never really wanted a podcast. That's just the way the cookie crumbled. And so the podcast was interesting. So obviously we have a tool called BlueBell Connect to support caregivers, which I've talked about before. And in it, we were working with one of our partners, Personalized Dementia Solutions, and Karen Tyrell, and we were kind of talking, let's do a webinar. And so we've created this webinar that was talking about technology and caregiving, and BlueBell Connect being one of those tools to do to support caregivers. And in it, when Karen and I were talking about how are we going to deliver this webinar, how are we going to distribute it, we were just kind of talking about, I was like, why don't we, put it on the podcast streaming services? And she goes, yeah, I don't do that either. So neither of us have really had any experience of putting these webinar things out on podcasts. We typically do on YouTube or, on our own website, share a link, these kind of things. But we never thought, how can we distribute it to a wider audience? So, and when Karen and I were talking, we just kind of figured, hey, let's try and throw it on these podcast platforms. What we learned is that in order to put it on a podcast platform, you have to have a podcast created. Makes sense in hindsight, right? But we never considered that. And me never really considered it. I don't know about Karen, but in talking, we never really figured it out. But we figured we had to create a podcast to launch these things. So I ended up creating Dementia Collective, and that was really the first episode. And it was created as a way just to get this webinar out there to the world in, Apple Podcasts and Spotify and these sort of ways, instead of just the conventional sharing a webinar that we've seen all the time. Then, it kind of grew. Then people started listening. We started getting subscribers on YouTube from it. And we started having people follow along on all the podcast platforms. And I was getting messages that people were appreciating the content and they wanted more of it. I was like, interesting. Let's do a couple of these and see what happens. And yeah, it was kind of one of those ones where I just started by talking to people that I knew and just kind of getting some insight, because there's some really remarkable people around me that have been in the space. So just talking to them what was going on, and it's really taken legs of its own. But that's kind of how we started.
That's fantastic. I sometimes call myself an accidental entrepreneur. So I love that you're an accidental podcaster. And again, based on some of the guests that you've had and some of the insights they've shared, I am super excited about the fact that that's what happened. So you talked a little bit about, a presentation sort of launched this into the world. And then you started talking about people or talking with people that you knew to help an audience gain a little bit more knowledge. When did you have a sense that you knew what it was you were building? When did the show kind of reveal itself to you? How did that all work?
Yeah, I don't know when I first realized what it could be. I mean, it's changed significantly. We're a year in, right? And I don't know if I really even know now what it is. It does a lot of things. So people on the show have heard me talk that of the dementia caregiving podcast, we are not even exclusively dementia, right? I also talk to, people that are doing endurance racing and stuff to try and create advocacy. I'm talking to researchers. I try not to get into the clinical piece. So I think for me, I never really understood what it could be because I never set limitations on what it would be. I just want to talk to people in this greater space that interest me, that I think have interesting stories that would resonate. And I think though that the podcast itself really started to, solidify in how we do it and the structure probably somewhere around episode 10, which is when we started shifting to Riverside, which is what we use right now to record everything. That's kind of where it solidified because earlier on, if you watch some of the earlier episodes, the first one with Karen Tyrell was a webinar. And so it's very webinar driven, very webinar sounding. The second one, Karen Murdoch, was in her condos. Actually, it was in a golf simulator uh, room of her condo building where people can go and hit the driving range, indoor golf. And so we managed to move couches and stuff and film it in there. And it was fine. Like the setting was good, but it was it was a development and trying to see what works and how do I make this more efficient. So then we had a few over Zoom with like Jim Mann and Elroy Jesperson, and then we kind of went back to this in person one. Like maybe in person would be better because you see these podcasts like Sean Ryan, Joe Rogan, this past Sunday with Theo Vaughn, these sort of ones, so podcasts I listen to, they're very much in person. And the video, I think, works so well in those in person environments. I was like, we should try and emulate. So I was all set up. I was like, I'm going to try and do these podcasts in person where possible. So we did one at the library. They had a little podcast studio thing you could book, and that was Tammy Lautner's. And audio was great. The filming of it was ridiculous because you're in this little tiny hot box and you're kind of filming it, and it was great content, but filming it was very awkward, and it was like the heat of summer, so it was super hot in that little box. And so then as time went on, we tried going back to Zoom and trying these different things, and ultimately landing on Riverside. I think that added some continuity of how this form would look, and I think that kind of set out how the show would be made. So I think that's kind of, if I had to answer a couple points, I don't really know where we are going. I don't really know what the form is going to take, but if I had to kind of say how does consistency and repeatability happen, it probably would have been around that episode 10 when we really started using Riverside in order to enable a consistent, repeatable outcome. That being said, the show has changed significantly from then, like lightning round, right? That
Yeah,
never
yeah,
existed earlier on. I don't know what episode it started appearing, probably 15-ish. I
yeah.
don't know.
Having been a guest on the show and sharing a pretty personal story, um, I've listened to all of the episodes now. I've enjoyed them all. And there are some where, even as a listener, I get quite emotional just listening to the content. So, what have you learned about interviewing people, especially when they're sharing such deep personal stories?
Yeah, one thing that is especially hard for me, as I like to talk. So, interviewing is really about sitting there and being quiet, listening, and trying to understand what are they saying, but what are they not saying? How can I ask this question in a different way, or where can I uh, ask questions to make them explain more? Um, I think for me, the interviewing piece really comes down to it's not just asking a question and getting a specific detail. It's trying to understand the humanity that is at play in these conversations, right? Because anyone can ask you a question of what is dementia? What was caregiving like for you? It sucked. It was hard. These sort of things. But what is the actual implication? Like, how did that change your life? How did that change your relationship with your loved one? How did your kids navigate these kind of conversations and these sort of questions that have had to really develop and unpack have really, I think, been a growth opportunity, not just for me on the show, but personally, like when you're having these conversations with people, outside of here. It's how do you continue to dive in and learn about them? So I think the process of being an interviewer was not an easy one, but it's an important one. And I think anyone can ask a question, but for me, it's like, how do I ask a question that one is leaving the audience having learned something, but two, how am I leaving the audience with information and feelings that they can relate to, even if they're not caring for someone with dementia today, but they may not remember the specific detail, but they'll remember the emotion that they had when they're talking about something, like Erin Chalmers in her episode, where she talks about her mother and the feeling that she had when she felt like the doctors were essentially killing her mother by forcing her to stay in that hospital and not giving her support she needed. And just the emotional weight of that. And instead of asking a different question to redirect and away from it, it's allowing the guest like Erin the opportunity to really expand on it and work through it. I think someone actually mentioned this in one of the episodes. I don't remember which one, but they mentioned that sometimes these interviews are almost cathartic. They're almost therapy. And I thought that was really interesting because for me, it's like I'm an engineer by trade. I'm definitely not anywhere near a therapist, counselor, any of those sort of things. I'm not really great at those things, I don't think. But it's like, how can I, in some of these caregiving stories, use questions to help them unpack and explore these sort of emotions? Because your story, Aaron's story, Governor Martin Schreiber's stories, they're not exclusive to just you guys. A lot of these details and feelings and emotions and circumstances are things that a lot of us feel. So how do I unpack it and make it so that it will become relevant for all people?
Yeah, for sure. And I will say that, again, being a fan of the show and having listened to all of the episodes, I really appreciate the time and space that you give to your guests to share their story because it's a difficult road. And, if there's any one regret I have, I wish that we were doing this 2 years ago and you were now 3 years down the road because my mother died last year. And with every new episode, I'm learning something new and I'm trying to manage that line between regret and guilt where I go, oh my God, I did things so wrong with mom. If I had only had this knowledge, then I could have done such a better job. So, yeah, completely appreciate that.
It's
And I,
interesting though, because the Anoushka, because we always have this regret. We always say, I wish I could have done better. But if we never really consider where we started from, how far did I get to this point of where I was delivering care? So I wish I would have done better, but I came so far, and we ignore that I came so far. It's like, I want to win the race. And everyone says, I want to win the race. That's great. But did you come from last place? So last place, first place is a long way, right? But if you go from middle or end to the middle, that's a big growth. And we oftentimes ignore that. Where do we start
yeah,
from? We only care about where we're going to. So in your case, I want to just acknowledge that you did amazing and you've done such great work for your mother and supporting your mother. And since your mother passing, you've done such great advocacy work. So don't diminish it. Like, I wish I would have done more because you did so much.
thanks. Oh, you're going to make me cry. Yeah, it's definitely something that, I've been fortunate to participate in a grief support group over the past year, and managing that transition from guilt to regret is a difficult one. It takes practice. But speaking of that, you have had some people that have shared some really inspirational, some very difficult stories. What one or two episodes have really left their mark on you personally?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what number this is. I think this is episode 39 or 40 or something. So there's been a lot of people that have been on. There's a lot of stories. Um, I think the story that you shared about uh, knowing how to cook eggs and not remembering how to cook eggs, that's a simple story that I've used other times in other circumstances. It's a really relevant story because it's impactful, right? It's something that people have done so often and your mom was so used to doing, then somehow it just kind of disappears. It kind of goes away. And that story has really moved me. And just because it's so simple and something that everybody um, can relate to. So that story has been meaningful. Aaron's as well. Um, Spencer Klein, who was episode 19, I believe, who was the man who rode across the United States one summer last year to, I guess 2 years ago now, to raise money for and awareness for frontotemporal dementia that his dad went through, and the journey of being, a child with a dad that has FTD. I think it's really interesting and really sad, and I've heard a lot of good feedback from that episode and people that are saying, you know what, just because my loved one is going through this doesn't mean I need to, hide away. And and it also gave a lot of awareness of how do you bring children into this environment? How do you engage them in discussion? How do you engage them in the dialogue, knowing that it is going to be hard? In a couple weeks after this episode goes live, we'll have Katie Brandt on the show, and she kind of talks about from the other lens. She was a mom to a newborn baby, and her husband was 29 with frontotemporal dementia. And so she talks about from the other lens of how do you support the child, kind of like a Spencer, while navigating this person with early onset. So I think that one was meaningful to me. Another one that was really meaningful was Jim Mann. So Jim Mann was episode 3, I believe, and he is the predominant voice in Canada of people living with dementia. 18 years he was diagnosed and living with it. I think we're at 19 now. But the fact he really broke down for me the fact that, you can have a dementia, but it doesn't have to cripple you. It doesn't have to mean a death sentence. I mean, Jim Mann does way more things while living with Alzheimer's than I do now. He is a master at productivity and getting stuff done.
Yeah.
And the fact that just because he has this thing doesn't mean that we have to write him off. Instead, we just, let's accommodate and give him different ways of doing these things. And I think that was amazing. Or Phyllis Fair, where she
He was
wrote
great.
she wrote a book.
Yeah.
Amazing, right? And she still drives her grandkids around and to and from school. Remarkable. And the fact that she may not be able to write in the conventional sense, she's able to do it by voice.
Right.
So let's find ways to let these people do things the way that they can so we retain who they are. And I think when I think about the most impact for me on the show and which episodes really kind of, stuck with me, it comes down to the ones that helped fundamentally change a perspective, a thought process. I always thought this is how it had to be, but it doesn't have to be. Even Carrie Albert's episode of finding joy in dementia. Oftentimes we say, dementia, it sucks. Caregiving is hard. It is not fun. It is not enjoyable. I hate seeing my loved one like this. And I can respect all those things. I can appreciate them and I can understand them. But there are moments of joy in there. And if you can find it in that moment, in the caring for them, know that, like Carrie said, there's always going to be the sunset. And she'll always make time to look at the sunset. So if it's the moment hard in that moment, know that in a little bit, you'll have that moment that you enjoy. So just look for those moments.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So, in a related way, I am very curious to learn what has your audience taught you and what listener feedback that you've received over the past year has been the most impactful for you?
I receive a lot of emails from folks that will go and say that, the show has given me a change in my perception. It's given me new insights on how to care for my loved one. I love the ones that come in and say that they didn't come in looking for a caregiver support sort of show. They came in, just wanting to learn about this, and they were able to get the supports because, as I wildly say, and I think I've said on the show already today, that I am not trying to give you clinical advice on anything. I'm just trying to talk through these things to learn myself. And that's kind of the feedback I've heard, is that folks have really been receptive to the idea that this is not a preachy clinical show. It is one that's just trying to be wholesome and genuine and supportive. and the audience has resonated. I got an email this last week from a man saying that uh, his mother was going through dementia, and he was trying to find support, and he came across our show, and now he really appreciates the fact that it gives him the tools and techniques and the supports to know that he can do this thing. And it was amazing. And it's just those little things that reaffirm that what we're doing is so important and leaves such a possible legacy for my grandmother.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, that's for you as a creator, what an amazing impact that you've been able to have on people. Even though I'm not a caregiver anymore, my mother's not here anymore, I still feel like I'm part of that community. And that's certainly something that I continue to experience by listening to new episodes. So again, just really grateful that you've started this. But we've talked a little bit about some of the really deep personal stories. How have you found it being a creator and a host? What kind of emotional weight do you carry from hearing these stories, being exposed to them regularly? What has that process been like for you?
It's been different. I think that sometimes there's anger, frankly. I mean, you have some of these individuals, like, again, we'll go back to Phyllis, where she mentioned that her and her husband were sitting in that waiting room waiting for the diagnosis. The doctor came on in, looked the husband right in the eye and said, "Your wife has dementia. Bring her back when she can't dress herself." Like, it just makes me angry. Or the fact that when Dr. Saskia Sivananthan came on, that we have this strategy in Canada, which is great. But what are we actually doing about it? We say Indigenous dementia is significantly uh, higher prevalence over the next 20 years. But we're doing really very little about it. There's some really good research happening in Canada about it. But practically speaking, in all the communities I hear from, it's few and far between. So some of those conversations have made me angry because I am a person that we see a problem, let's just solve a problem. And that's the engineering mindset, right? Let's just get this thing done and create a solution. And sometimes I find bureaucratically that when I hear some of these stories that doesn't happen. And Lori LeBay, he talks about the fact that she had to create a dementia cafe, not even in her state of Minnesota, but she had to create in Wisconsin because the system wouldn't allow her to create one in her state. That's wild. The fact that someone wants to go and create this support organization, this support entity in a way that's impactful for their community. But the bureaucrats and the organization say, no, 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 we're not going to do this thing. That's infuriating because there's so many people that need the support. But then from a caregiving lens, sometimes when I hear folks talk, it makes me sad because when I hear the story of like Stephanie Fauquier and how her mom was being cared for and how she was able to bring her mom to all these races across Canada and do those kind of things, I'm like, what, kind of like you mentioned earlier, what could I have done differently supporting my grandmother? How can I have done it differently? Did I miss the mark in certain ways? Near the end of her life, we really we would visit her and we'd have birthday parties and stuff at their community, and that's what we did. But how would that have shifted if we would have brought her up? So some of those reflection pieces of what could I have done differently, I think have really impacted me because even though I said earlier on, you did the best you could and the whole thing, doesn't mean that I, on the other side of the table, don't have that same feeling. Doesn't mean I don't say, I should have done this better. I should have visited a few more times. So I think as I go through this show, maybe it's cathartic for me. Maybe it's me wrestling with these things and these, let's say inner demons that I have about how I navigate or how I had stigma when I was younger as a child. Maybe it's these sort of things that the show has really given me the opportunity to unpack and explore.
Yeah. And I totally hear you. Hey, I'm Catholic, so I'm no stranger to guilt. I know how to do that very well. And I think to your point, you know, we're always thinking about how could we have done things better. But with all of the new learning and guests that you have had, what has the Dementia Collective taught you about dementia? I feel like we're trying to get dementia to a place where cancer now is, which is there's a really coordinated approach. People understand that the stigma is so reduced and people are really working towards a common goal. It feels like we're at the start of that journey here and it seems like there's no shortage of things to learn. So what are some of the key things that you have learned about dementia through the creation and hosting of this podcast?
That everyone says that they understand dementia in the general population, but very few people do. The amount of people that hear what I do and they go, "Oh, my grandmother had dementia. Oh, what do you know what kind? How did it impact her? How did it impact your family? Oh, I don't know. We kind of just let the community deal with her." I hear about that all the time. And I think ultimately that is the demonstration of stigma, right? The fact that everyone has this kind of, not everyone, but most people have this connection to dementia. But few of us actually understand what that really means. It's always a, my grandmother had it, but I don't really know that much because my aunt dealt with it, or one of these sort of things that you pass it off. And I think another thing that's taught me is that dementia is super prevalent, and but we always have this guilt and assume that I must have done something wrong. My mother, my grandmother, whatever, must have done something wrong. Stephanie Fauquier talked about this on her episode, the fact that they say physical activity, they say eating well, getting enough sleep. Now they're saying brushing and flossing your teeth with the plaque can help decrease Alzheimer's prevalence. They say do all these things and it will decrease your prevalence. Dr. Rob McLeod, so Stephanie's mom, did every single one of those boxes, but it could not and did not prevent her from getting Alzheimer's. She still developed Alzheimer's and passed away very rapidly after. So I think ultimately it's shown that nobody is immune to this. It can happen to anyone. And because of that, stigma shouldn't happen. And I mean, that's part of the reason I created the 60 for 60 series that you can find on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook and TikTok. Really. And I spent 60 days, 60 seconds, and I highlight 60 people that have been through this, to the effect of Robin Williams, Sir Terry Pratchett, who the guy who made a sword after he got knighted because he was mad that Queen Elizabeth never gave him a sword after he became an official knight, right? To Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, her mother. So like these dementia is not immune to any person. And I think if I can help highlight that, the better, because I have people reaching out to a 60 for 60 going, I didn't realize dementia was so prevalent. And it's because either some people in the public space, they say, we've got dementia and they hide away, or they say, we're going to be a public voice like Emma Hemming Willis and say, we're going to talk about this and help reduce the stigma. So I think it's been a platform to start having these discussions. Or we have the pop culture critique series on YouTube, where I'll talk about a film and talk about how it contrasts how we perceive dementia, aging, stigma, these sort of things, like the episode Sarek of Star Trek, which I know you're the biggest Star Trek fan alive, Anoushka, so thank you for
Andy,
that.
where did we go so wrong with you? Star Wars. Star Wars.
No, we're not. Don't derail this. Star Trek is the great one. But so this episode of Star Trek, Sarek, where they talk about stigma, they talk about how does it work when your cognition changes, how you perceive things changes. And I think it's a brilliant episode because it is an allegory for how our system exists supporting people through dementia. And so just kind of talking about that and unpacking what that means, to give a little bit of an uncomfortable truth for what we do without really knowing we do it. Like in Sarek, They controlled him. They wouldn't let him talk to different people. They made sure that he knew exactly what he was doing, and they only let him do certain things. They wouldn't let him talk to Captain Picard outside of certain pre-agreed upon times because they didn't want to risk him exposing the fact he had Bendai syndrome. So just these kind of discussions, I think, again, the Dementia Collective allowed for these sort of discussions to happen on a more preeminent basis.
Yeah, for sure. And I am really grateful for some of the stuff that you're doing with pop culture, because to your earlier point, no one seems to be immune to dementia's clutches. You talked about Stephanie's mother. I mean, my mom was the same way. She should have been 100% clear for all of the lifestyle factors that she had. And so, being someone in the South Asian community, I'm really glad that we're now having these broader awareness conversations, because in some racialized communities, that shame and stigma comes from places of just great ignorance or lack of education about some of these basic things. And so the more we can normalize the conversation, the more important and the better off society is going to be. So thanks for that. So let's switch gears a little bit and go a little bit peek behind the curtain and take a look of what it takes to make this podcast and go a little bit behind the scenes.
Sure.
What's something that has surprised you about now becoming a podcaster?
The amount of time it takes to do a podcast. I thought you record this thing, call it a day, and
Put it out
post it.
there.
I thought that's what it would be. It sounded great, right? Let's just sit and talk to this person for an hour, whatever, and then move along to the next one. The amount of work that goes on outside of recording is absurd. I never would have thought it. Between making a thumbnail, because what Jason Beauchamp and I were actually talking about this weekend, making a thumbnail, what I think a good thumbnail is, in my mind, is radically different from a thumbnail that will get clicks on
The
YouTube.
algorithm, yes, yes.
Just wild. Like, I'm like, some of these thumbnails look so stupid. Like, there's one about, I saw, unrelated, but Mr. Beast, where it's like, I don't know, 7 days in Arctic or something. And there's a video of like him like on the ground like this and being clawed by a polar bear. I'm like, that's so stupid. But that's what people click on. And I'm like, how? So my thumbnail started off being very clinical. And I asked ChatGPT one day, I said, what's wrong with my thumbnails? And they said, it reads very much like a company info session. I'm like, that's not the demographic we're looking for here. So I think for me, it's like, how do we build a thumbnail that works? And that takes quite a bit of time to do that, because, I mean, you can throw it in one of these algorithms and get them to make something, but the distortion on the faces is just wild, or they're terrible. For example, the thumbnail for this episode, Anoushka, I tried cutting a few corners at first to get it made by ChatGPT, and I was like, I'm going to see if I can do this because I want a fun thumbnail. It was terrible. And I'll put the image up here somewhere on the screen so you guys can see it. But I showed you Anoushka. Like, it was terrible. So
Is that the
unfortunately,
one with the celebration ribbon or
Yeah,
something, and it was like halfway out of my face? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
and the little pixel art versions of party hats and stuff, it was terrible. Terrible. Very concerning. There was more versions of that, which will show up all here, that you didn't necessarily get to see because they didn't spam you with terrible versions. But the thing is that they take time, and then drafting the descriptions or putting the tags or scheduling the trailer when it goes live, which the trailer takes time too. All these things, what seems like you record an hour, put an hour out there, that may be the case. But if I want to try and reach more people and help break the stigma, I need to do more than that. And I think that's something that I wasn't really expecting, the time commitment that would go into doing it. And for that reason, some episodes are pre-recorded multiple months out, because it takes multiple months for me to go through it all and get it all sorted out, because I am a reasonably one-man army doing all of these things. So it takes me time. So some people say, is this episode going to come out this week? If I exist and get this out within 90 days, folks, I am happy. I consider that a win. And but that's just because I'm also trying to go and deliver the best quality product that I possibly can to folks. And I don't necessarily want to rush it. I want to make sure that what I'm doing is the best one. So I'll have listened to it and watched it a few times. And after editing, make sure everything is, the best that I can possibly make it. So it is the best informative way for the folks.
Well, as a small business owner who's trying to build my own brand, I can totally empathize with trying to figure out what algorithms are and how to beat them or at least make them work in your favor. So, well done on you, because I know that's not a small job at all.
And it's funny though, because the YouTube algorithm differs from the Spotify algorithm,
Yes,
which
it sure
differs from the Apple
does.
podcast. So it's
Yep.
like, how do you do and meet all of these specific pieces,
Yep.
right? And you're competing against some of these big folks. So how you have the Tipas and the Natalies and the Carries of the world that are amazing, have such great traction. But ultimately, you're competing against them. So how do you bring something that the algorithm, oh, this is different than what they have, because the algorithm would rather serve what they have, where they've got
Yeah.
100,000+ subscribers and stuff. So it's easier to follow them because it has the track record that people like that stuff.
So, kind of along that line, and now that you know what you know, at any point during the year, did you start to develop a formal plan or have expectations for what the show was going to be? And now that you're at a year one and kind of in reflection mode, how do you feel about how reality may or may not have matched up with what your hopes and dreams were for this first year?
Did I have a plan? Um, yes. Did I follow the plan tightly? No. I had a lot of people that I wanted on the show, and people confirmed, and then they dropped out. Um, and so I just had to go with it and say, okay, well, this isn't going to work. Let's find a new avenue. I mean, there's topics that I want to discuss, but we just haven't got there. I haven't had the right person to come on and
Yeah.
have certain conversations. There's some very sensitive conversations that I want to have on the show, but I don't want just a generic person with an opinion on something to come on and discuss it. And I want the right person to have these discussions, the qualified, credentialed person that has deep experience in some of these very sensitive topics. Um, so, do I have a plan? Loosely, as they say in the military, the best plans are good until the bullets are flying, right? Same kind of idea. I have a plan, kind of, but for me, it's like, how do I just continue to see where it takes me? I think I've said it on, maybe it's this show, maybe it's other podcasts I've been on, but I say I really exist on what the Bible says in Proverbs 16:9, right? We can determine our steps, but the Lord ultimately determine our course. So I can create the best direction, say this is what I'm going to do, but ultimately I never really know where it's going to end up. Hence, I have a podcast now, and I think for me that's kind of the thing. I have goals for the future. I have people I want on the show, but maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work, and I just need to be okay with that and just say, what do I consider success? And I think for me, success is if I can make a difference for one family going through this, or one person that's diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, to know that, it happens. That doesn't mean that you're incapable. We have a guy coming on the show named Michael Booth, and he is the first person diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's to have ever wrote a fully published murder mystery. And he was told after getting diagnosed, you can't do this thing, but he can't. And if I can help bring a voice to those people to say, this is not the end, your journey is a little different, but it's still going on. You can go and do a one-man off Broadway show like Samuel Simon. You can do these things. So don't quit, keep going, keep pushing forward. So if I can do that, I consider it a success.
And I know a couple of your guests have talked about, okay, we've got dementia now, let's take away all the knives. And it's like, no, no, don't need to do that. So you mentioned a little bit about, some of the guests that you like to have. Now that you've got, an established track record, you've had some very impressive guests on. I count myself very lucky to have made the cut based on some of the guests that you've had. How do you decide on who you'd like to have on the show, or how do you find them?
So there's certain folks that reach out to me, certain folks I reach out to. I probably get a couple email requests a day for people that want to be on the show, which
Oh,
is
wow.
truly a blessing, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, some of them have been Glenna Hecht, Alfredo, Botello, some of these folks that have been on the show, and they were remarkable and they gave amazing stories and they reached out. So when I get a lot of requests in, I go check it out and I will kind of explore and see, one, do I align with kind of what they're saying? Because I don't want my platform to perpetuate things I fundamentally disagree with. But then what are they kind of wanting to talk about? What's their background? And then if I like those things, then I'll meet them and talk to them and see if it's a right fit, because, not every show is a right fit for everyone. As my show is unscripted. That sometimes doesn't work for people, and that's okay. When it comes to um, people, though, that I'm recruiting, so the Tipas, the Natalie, the Carries of the world, it's sometimes easier, sometimes hard, right? Some of these people have large public following, and it's a large journey to try and get them on, because they're obviously super, super busy. So I'll send them, reach out wherever I can, whether it's Instagram, whether it is uh, an email, whether I know somebody that knows them, then maybe I'll connect them that way. But for me, it's like I never lose anything by reaching out.
Trying.
Like, if I can reach out to a person and try and see if they want to talk on the show, great. What do I have to lose? Absolutely nothing. The worst thing I can say is no, right? So, what do I have to lose? So, on my computer, I have an ongoing list of people that would be interesting for me to have on the show, and as things go on, I will add and remove people as time goes on. But I find that more often than not, if you can get through to a person, they're reasonably open to talking. They're reasonably open to telling their story, because dementia affects any family, right? It can affect anyone. So they want to help reduce that stigma. Sometimes they're just busy and sometimes they never see it. So if I can get in touch them, they're usually pretty good for, saying yes.
Great. So, on that front, is there anything that you've learned about what the difference is in interviewing a clinical expert versus a caregiver versus a person living with dementia?
I think when we talk about interviewing people living with dementia, um, it's slowing down, not making too complicated of questions, just making them simple questions that are direct. Um, because it's easy when I sometimes give long, complicated questions to get lost in that, and for a lot of people that's the case too, right? And so I think depending on who I'm interviewing, has to change the questions of how am I going to um, frame the question up. I think when I interview clinical folk, try not to get too far down into the weeds. Like Dr. Tommy Wood is a really good example of this, where he has so much knowledge up here of this protein or this thing, that in his clinical world, a lot of people know that stuff. But how do I get answers out of him that make sense to the layman folk, right? Like myself, that don't have that clinical knowledge. I think it is complicated and difficult because everyone has different experience, different perspectives. And I just need to try and meet them where they're at and ask questions, like if you or somebody else, or ask them what is actually relevant to the listener, instead of, you know, go in with these canned questions in advance that say, these are my talking points I'm going to talk about. Like, what does the listener actually care about? Because oftentimes there's incongruency between this is what the listener wants and cares about versus what this person wants to talk about. The two are not always aligned. So how do I kind of meet in the middle to give the experience? So if it is the person living with dementia, oftentimes they want to tell their story. They want to say what they went through, what they experienced. And then for the caregiver, how did you adapt and how did you support? Because that's two sides of the same coin. The caregiver and the person with dementia, two sides of the same coin. So how do you come alongside and give the information so that whichever side of that coin you're on, you feel appropriate? Maybe if a person with dementia listens to the caregiver episode, maybe they gain some insight onto why their loved one is doing what they're doing. Maybe it's why their loved one is trying to put these boundaries on them. So just try and ask questions, that help create dialogue, because without dialogue, we have a lot of problems.
So, for our audience, you may be aware that BlueBell Village is now a Patreon channel, and members have been very supportive of this podcast and the other work that Andy is doing. And so, usually in an episode, there is an opportunity for members of the Patreon to ask the guest a question. We're not going to do that in this case, but if you'd like to sign up and become a member of the village on Patreon, we're going to do a few questions here that are going to be shared only with those folks. So we'll encourage you to do that. And as we get into the first of the questions, I want to ask you, what ideas have people presented to you you were mentioning some of the solicitations you get from folks that want to come on the show. What are some of the things that you've had to say, not sure that this fits, and you've passed on? Taking the opposite approach there, what's one thing that you believe about dementia care that you think might make other people uncomfortable? What's one thing that you find difficult in the balance between your work with Bluebell Village, managing this podcast, your advocacy research work, and your own family life? What's something about dementia care that people keep studying, reporting on, or acknowledging, but do very little about? If you had a private 5-minute phone call with the politician of your choice in Canada, who would it be and what would be the top dementia related thing you would advocate for? We're now going to get back to the regular show.
But before we do that, I just want to acknowledge and thank the Patreon community as well. We couldn't have been here without you. So I just want to thank you so much for joining us, supporting us, asking some really deep and profound questions to the guests. So thank you for everything you do. And I hope that you've enjoyed the first year of the Dementia Collective, as well as this episode and the bonus part of this episode that you guys got to have exclusively. So I want to say thank you as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. All right, so let's skip to some of the more fun things. So let's talk about some of your favorite moments over the past year. What's one of the what's an unexpected benefit that you've enjoyed in building your community of experts through this show?
The amount of, it wasn't expected, but the amount of people that have been on the show that I text on a regular basis, I didn't expect it, but I now have this Rolodex of people that when something is going on, or I want perspectives, or I'm trying to say, do you know this person? I can text, and or I can call, or I can talk to. It's been amazing. And some of these people I never thought that I would have been connected to. You see them as you're scrolling, and you're like, this person's amazing. I never would have thought I'd be able to build these relationships or have virtual coffee calls with some of these people, or due to some weird circumstances, some of these people have met my kids now. And because my kids just don't always know boundaries, and they come onto the show and accidentally during recording, which is edited out so you guys don't see it. But like, so my kids have met some of these remarkable individuals, and so my kids have met these people. It's just been so interesting, and I think that's my takeaway, is that I've just had the tremendous honor and blessing to get to know some of these people. Like I mentioned earlier, I was texting Jason Beauchamp this weekend, talking about thumbnails and what works and what doesn't work to try and bring more awareness to our causes. Who would think it?
Yeah, yeah. When you think about the recording process and some of those behind the scenes, maybe blooper things that you do have to edit out for the final show, is there a favorite moment that sticks out in terms of any of that?
I would say that there's been a few things. So my most common thing that I will edit out is me drinking coffee, or tea or whatever I'm drinking, because I just think I look creepy when I'm drinking a cup. So there's probably 2 or 3 times this entire show where you actually see me do it. It's because I just think I look weird doing it, and the way that the camera's positioned, everything, I just don't like it. So I will specifically cut it out, and I don't realize how often I do it until I'm editing, and I'm like, It's at least 10 or 15 times I have to edit out each episode. Again, why it takes time is because I have to edit myself out drinking
That is funny.
drinks. But I've also spilt my coffee on myself mid recording. So that was an experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, well, looking ahead to year 2, where do you see the show going this coming year? What kind of direction have you set for it?
I think year 2, I'm really trying to bring on some bigger names. I mean, we've had some really cool names year 1.
You sure have.
But I want to see, how can we bring bigger? How can we bring some of these big mainstream names to it? Like, if I keep bringing them and throwing these names out here, maybe somehow they will come on. So for me, it's one, bring these bigger names on here that can bring insight perspective. Because one thing that we've talked about on the show before is I think Hollywood does a terrible job, frankly, of perpetuating stigma in aging. So, like, how can we talk about people behind the scenes that are actively challenging that are actively going to say, yes, that's terrible, but I am trying to do these things that will eliminate that. So, Hilarity for Charity, right? Seth Rogen's organization, which was created because his mother-in-law had dementia. And so he created this organization. It's doing a great job of really breaking that stigma from a comedy perspective. I think it's amazing. So having someone like him on the show would be amazing.
Yeah, manifestation. Let's put the names out there, and then maybe it'll happen. So yeah, give us your top guest.
I have a list, like I said, on my computer, but I also have a list sitting on my desk right now, and we can't really see it at all. But some of the people that I think would be amazing on this show would be Willie or Cy Robertson. And so Phil Robertson had Alzheimer's, and he passed away right before the first episode of the revival came back. And what I appreciated so much is that the Robertson family chose to include him in that episode because he was so fundamental to the original Duck Dynasty and the Duck Commander show. And he played such a strong role that they brought him in. And his bit is the very final minute or so of the first episode. They just ask him a question, and he just goes like this, which is kind of trademark for him. And so it was so impactful, the fact that they recognized they're going through this with him, but they still brought him back. They included him. They engaged him. And I think there's so much significance to that. So Willie or Cy can kind of talk about that caregiving journey of, he was a public figure that didn't want to be in the public figure oftentimes, or public light oftentimes. How did you wrestle with that? And so there's one, Carrie Kasem. So Casey Kasem's daughter, she actually had a podcast, and it specifically talked about the ordeal between the Kasems and how allegedly Jean Kasem was using the dementia diagnosis for Casey as a mechanism to keep the family away. So what interests me in that story specifically is the idea that, dementia sometimes is weaponized. It is a tool that can be navigated. So what sort of protections need to be in place to prevent that from happening? Because if it can happen to Casey Kasem, it can happen to anyone, right? The Kasem family had the mechanisms to fight it and lobby it in multiple states across the United States. So they had the mechanism to do it. So what other things can happen to other caregivers so that won't happen? Emma Hemming Willis, I think she's an amazing job of being an advocate within the FTD community to talk about Bruce from primary progressive aphasia into FTD and how they're supporting him, still including him, and where they shield him, where they don't. I think it's been very interesting to follow her journey into, even the book she wrote is so profound. Another one that, as a Canadian, probably would resonate with you is Julie Munch, Robert Munch's daughter. And she's talked lots about her dad's journey and how he has these stories that are so strong, but he reconciles his positionality now with what does he remember, what doesn't. So that's another one that's super interesting to me. I'd love to have Julie on here. And then the other one that I think would be profound is Queen Maxima of the Netherlands. Again, we're shooting, if we're talking Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, because she, to my research, is the very first member of a royal family to acknowledge that they're an active caregiver for someone living with dementia. So if it can happen in the royal family, it has reasonably all the world's, resources at hand. And she's still talking about the tension and the stress and the feelings of being a caregiver. Anyone can go through that.
Yeah.
And then I think those are obviously the big visibility people, but I want to see more of the family dynamics. I think there's so much there because some of the most impactful episodes are the ones where they talk about the family. What is the family going through? Oftentimes dementia doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's a larger piece that has a lot of people communicating, a lot of reliance on each other. So how do we discuss what you're going through? How do we normalize those tensions? Because sometimes there's relationships. Alfredo talked about it where he explains that sometimes the siblings don't respond well. Sometimes the siblings are at odds with each other. Sometimes one sibling only flies in, is the glory child, and they leave again.
Right.
So how do you reconcile those relationships? I think that is something that is important for me to talk about and to bring light to, because I think that's an unspoken piece that happens, is those family dynamics. So I think I would like to dive in more of those people that have the family tension, family dynamics, not because I want drama, but because I want to try and find a way to use those stories to normalize what is happening to their family and happening to most other families, because family drama and family tension exists. So let's figure out, how do we navigate in some of these very complicated circumstances?
All right. Well, it's now time for you to be on the hot seat for lightning round. Are you ready?
Always ready.
Excellent. Okay, let's start. Coffee or tea?
I'm going to go tea. I love me tea, David's tea specifically. They've got cream of Earl Grey. It is delicious. But what I've learned is 2.5 liters of it in a day is too much. But then decaf coffee, which is what I have right here. Ironic enough, it says full to empty in the coffee cup today. But I'm decaf coffee except before a run.
Okay, at the risk of completely polarizing your audience and potentially alienating half, dogs or cats?
Oh, dogs. Hate cats.
Oh, you answered that question correctly. I was going to ask Star Trek versus Star Wars, but we already know that you don't know
We
the
already know
answer
the answer
to
to
that.
that.
No,
But
we're
I
not.
hate cats. The one thing I hate, it's just, so there's one instance where I would pick a cat, and that is on a farm, because one of the things I hate more than cats is mice. So I love a farm cat that doesn't bother me, and it just eats mice. Love them. They're great. I don't touch them. Their tongues creep me out. I love a farm cat though, because I hate mice. But what I hate more than all those things, probably equal with mice actually, is birds. I hate birds,
Really?
Anoushka. I'm terrified of birds. Absolutely petrified of birds.
All birds?
All birds. I've been attacked by a peacock. I've been attacked by Canadian goose. I'm attacked by a ruffed grouse. There's a few other birds I'm attacked by. I hate birds. Birds are
Oh my
terrifying.
gosh.
Literally, I was on a run this week. Actually, it was a couple days ago. Monday. I was on a run on Monday, and I'm like a kilometer, 2 kilometers into the run, and I grab the pole and I start doing some stretching, like leg swings and stuff, and I hear like hissing. I'm like, super. I look over, and this is my normal running path, and I look over, and it's 2 Canadian geese coming at me, and behind them is their little chicks, and they're coming at me. I'm like, oh, I'm out of here. And then we come around the corner, and there's another one, and I yell at these birds and tell them to get away, because I want nothing to do with these birds. I hate birds. They're scary. They bite.
We need to rename them because they're giving our nationality a bad name. Canadian geese are jerks. I'm with you on that for sure.
Peacock is worse. Have you ever been around a peacock?
Have not had that experience. So
Calgary Zoo. I got bit by in the Calgary Zoo.
oh my gosh.
They let them roam. Terrifying. No.
Poor Andy. All right. What's one word in caregiving that you wish would disappear?
Demented.
Uh,
I think oftentimes people will go and say that person's demented, and that there's something, which leads to people thinking there's something wrong. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just having a little harder time.
yeah. What's one sign of burnout that you wish people didn't ignore?
Yelling. I find that when I feel like I'm burnt out, then I just start getting flustered. Everything bothers me, and I get a short fuse. And then you take it out on other people, and that's not the right approach, but it's a common one.
If we were to make a movie about your life, who would play you and your dad? And I include him in that because when I had the pleasure of meeting him a few weeks ago, I could not believe that you are a complete carbon copy of him.
I hear that all the time, that I look and sound like him, to the effect that you're in the iPhone, the swipe up and it recognizes your Face ID. He can do it on my phone. It's infuriating. And when we use the Siri, don't kick off. When we use that, it always kicks onto my phone as well. So his favorite thing to do is to use it. So yeah,
That's funny.
it always kicks off. So I don't agree with you, but Apple seems to agree with you, and people seem to agree with you. I would say to person to play me, younger version of me, I would probably look at, or probably present one, Taron Egerton from Kingsman. I like him. He's great. And continue the British thing that I didn't realize till right now that they're British is Richard Madden, who is in Eternals. He was also in The Bodyguard on BBC, which was a brilliant show. So I would say one of them because I think I don't think they're as tall as me, but I think that they would convey it well. Older me, I'd say Matthew McConaughey. If we're talking me way later, don't know what my life will be like way later. But Matthew McConaughey, love Matthew McConaughey. He's great. Who would play my dad? The only name that's coming to mind, or two names that are coming to mind, are Russell Crowe and Anthony Hopkins. I don't know if they're any good or not,
Amazing. I
but
love that.
those are the only names that are coming to mind right now when I'm thinking of older actors.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, well, staying with the pop culture theme, what's one show or movie that helps you to reset after a hard day?
Oh, Rocky Four.
Four. Okay.
Rocky Four is my favorite movie of all time. Um, I have seen it well over 1,000 times. There was in high school, for example, I'd watch the movie every single day. While I was working out in high school, I'd watch it every single day. It would be on repeat. I used to watch it
That
downstairs
would have
in
run
the
out
gym
the
here.
VHS tape, no?
What's that?
That would have run down the VHS tape from all the
It was DVD
rewinding?
at that point.
Oh, it was DVD, okay.
DVD, so
Oh,
we were
I
fine.
guess I'm older
We
than you.
survived. But yeah, we used to watch it downstairs when I was working in the gym here as well. Like I love Rocky Four, but now as I have kids, I don't really get a chance to watch my own shows to unwind. It's what do the kids want to watch, and that is what we watch.
Fair enough. What keeps you doing this work?
I think hearing from families and caregivers that it's helping.
Yeah, for sure. What's the most human thing that's happened to you lately?
I think having to coach my kids soccer, just hearing the giggles and the laughter and the craziness that ensues is so remarkable and so normal. So I'd say that the fact that just getting to be a person and spend time with the kiddo and all of his friends and teammates, and yeah, that's the most human thing.
That's awesome. What gives you hope right now?
I think the fact that we're seeing more discussion about dementia and that people recognize that's a problem, that we need to do something about it. So just that is so give me such hope right now.
Okay, and my last question, how did you enjoy being interviewed today?
I prefer being on the other side of the thing, asking questions, which is ironic because I love to talk. Um, but I think I like to talk about things that aren't my personal life. Now I'm on this side of the thing. There are a lot more, what do I feel about things? So I like to speak about data and facts and things like that, not exposing and talking about myself. So it's a little harder that way. But it's also tiring on the voice box to to talk for this. And I appreciate being able to give people an inside look into how did we get here, because oftentimes people look at podcasts and or shows or whatever and they go, it must be easy, or I wonder what's like back there. So just give people an inside look, I think is wonderful. But I'm glad that you were asking the questions versus somebody else, because having my friend do it is wonderful, and I appreciate you for doing that. So thank you, Anoushka.
Yeah, and thank you, Andy. This has been a lot of fun, and I'm really honored that you asked me to be the guest host for this episode. So thank you for sharing your story.
And because this is our first birthday, I wanted to do something small as a thank you to our community. I'm giving away a special prize to one member of the community. So to enter, make sure wherever you get your podcast, you're subscribed, whether it's Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, wherever it is, make sure you're subscribed. Like this episode and leave a comment with the phrase, remember the person. And then tell us one episode or moment or guest or topic from season 1 of the Dementia Collective that stayed with you. So again, the phrase, remember the person, and then tell us one episode, moment, guest, or topic that's really stayed with you. That's it. And 2 weeks from now, I will draw for the winner, and you will see me send that winner a message. So make sure you have your inbox things available to receive that message. And I just want to again acknowledge the folks listening. Thank you for being a part of this journey. It's been a really humbling and amazing one, and I never thought we would be here at 1 year, but here we are, and we couldn't be here without each and every one of you. So thank you. And Anoushka, thank you for being our most loyal fan. Thank you.
Well, thank you for making such a great episode and show. I look forward to Wednesdays every week now. So it's fantastic. Thanks, Andy.
Of course. And again, you know the spiel. If today's conversation resonated with you, make sure to follow the Dementia Collective wherever you get your podcasts, and share this episode with someone who you think might benefit. And if you'd like to help us grow this movement, please consider becoming a member of the Village on Patreon. Among the benefits, like the ability to ask questions to our guests, you get early access to every episode, plus the satisfaction of helping powerful voices reach more caregivers around the world. And finally, if you're on your own caregiving journey, remember, you are not alone. We're here at BlueBell to help connect you with the supports and resources that truly fit your family's unique needs. Until next time, remember, you are not alone, you are strong, and you're doing something that matters more than you know. I'll see you next time.